Hello my friends, I hope you're all having a wonderful day today, and welcome back to another episode of r/ProRevenge, where many of you come to get your daily dose of satisfaction by listening to other people get what they deserve. Guys, today's episode is gonna be a wild one. There's gonna be two stories. The first story is about a terrible neighbor getting what he deserves. The second story is how OP gets back on a person who caused their family so much pain. I hope you stay for the stories today and subscribe for future videos. This first story is titled, My Parents and Sister Feared Their Only Neighbor for 5 years. Around 8 years ago, my parents and sister had moved out to a log cabin that we built as a family for 6+ years. They live on a secluded lake and bought 10 acres for themselves, and to the north, another couple bought the 5-acre plot right next to us. We were the only two neighbors next to each other for about 1.8 miles. At first, the couple was friendly and had no problems at all. After around 6 months of them living there and building their new home, my parents bought 144 acres to the north of them. This means that his property is sandwiched between our two properties, and the only way we could get to our land is to cross his strip of land due to easement laws. He had no problem at first, but one day, the trail we used to get to our land to the north was covered with large logs, branches, yellow tape, and a no trespassing sign. My dad went to ask what was going on. The owner, who we'll call John, came up to my dad and I and demanded that we give him a 20-yard wide and 40-yard long piece of our property to the north of him. He said he wanted to cut down some trees to the north of him to make sure that none of them fell onto his house, since it's a thickly wooded area. So of course, my dad said no, and that he wouldn't even sell a small portion of that land that he requested to be given to him for free. This is where the 5 years of hell started. Before I mention all the batshit crazy things he's done to us over the years, I want to point out that he's a born fraud and took a settlement from the railroad company he used to work at for a back injury that would leave him disabled for life, which is not true at all. We found out that he sues everyone that gets into his way because his oldest daughter is a lawyer and works the system. Here's a small list of things he's pulled mainly towards my parents, and he's gotten away with everything for 5 years because his daughter tells him exactly how to stay in the clear. He has slashed the tires of our 2 4-wheelers so we couldn't drive them to our land to the north on 2 occasions. He has shot or slashed the tires of our vehicles when we're gone in the middle of the night. We put up cameras, but they were not clear enough to prove it was him. He threatened my dog's life. My golden retriever Bailey is outside for most of the day, and John's dog is also named Bailey. The 2 dogs love to play together, but John did not like that. He said he would put a bullet into my dog if he was ever on his property again. After that, weeks later, he would start to yell out Bailey to lure our dog onto his property. I then saw him grab my dog by the collar, put a pistol to his head, and said that if this dog ever came onto his property again, or played with his dog, we'd find our dog in the ground. On several occasions, he would hit golf balls into our windows, and blame it on me since I was a golfer. Once again, everything he did we could not prove in court. When his house was being built, he went through 3 different contractors because John was threatening to sue every contractor for every little thing, and all 3 contractors left him. When he was getting his driveway poured, he offered to help the contractor, and once again he was pulling another scam. Where I live, if someone starts helping a contractor with work, there's a weird law that states that a contractor would need to pay John for the work he helped with. Long story short, this went to court, and he got his $10,000 driveway for free. Plus, John took the guy for another $15,000 for some other stuff that his lawyer daughter helped with. We were in the process of finishing up my parents' house, and he stole very specific wood from our place to use in his house. It was a couple $1,000s worth of wood. Once again, we did not have enough evidence for a search warrant. And the last reason. During Thanksgiving dinner several years ago, our house started on fire due to the stonemason cutting corners and using cheap and wrong parts for the fireplace. Firefighters from 5 cities were dispatched because we live in the country. Due to the amount of fire trucks that were coming and going, John thought it was a nuisance and took his truck and parked it sideways on a strip of road that was so tight that the firefighters coming and going could not get through. He stated that we were ruining their Thanksgiving due to the commotion of our house being burnt down and the fire truck sirens. The next fire truck showed up and used force within their rights to plow his truck off the road. John tried to sue us and the fire department for damaging his truck, but it never made it to court because the fire department had the rights to do so. What I listed above only scratched the surface. There's so much more that he did to my family that my mom and sister wanted to move because they were afraid of what he might do next. And this is where all the pieces started falling into place to take him down. The spring after our house burnt down, there was a storm and 2 trees from our property fell onto John's lawn, and he called demanding that we remove the trees. We had no equipment at this time and told him that we couldn't get to it immediately. So what John did was cut down a 20 by 40 yard area of trees to drag the trees to our property to the north of him. Later, he set the pile of wood on fire and burnt down 20 plus more trees and 20 acres of prairie grass, and one of the trees that burnt down to the north was inhabited by a bald eagle. We could confirm the 24 trees he cut down to drag the fallen trees through, but couldn't prove who started the fire to burn the trees. When I saw that he had cut down a number of our trees on our property to the north of him, I took detailed photos of all the cut down trees and marked the type of tree and how thick the trunks were. It turns out in my state, there's a monetary value to those trees, and he was screwed. However, when I was marking the trees he cut down, I realized that I didn't know where the true property line was. A few weeks later, I found the prints to where the property line was and where he built his house. I now know why John wanted that land. His 5,000 square foot garage and underground propane tank was a few feet on our property. Now during this time, John had put his house up for sale and put a $120,000 markup on what the actual market price was. We found out why he was doing this, because he and a friend had gambled a lot of their savings on buying the property around the lake in hopes of reselling. We were finally able to put a lien on his house, and that was his only lifeline to get cash to make their land payments. To make the rest of the story go by faster, I'll skip to the part where we ended up buying the house. We told him to put the price back down to market value, and then my father said that we could settle the price of the trees that he cut down that belonged to us outside of court, and he agreed to settle on lowering the price. My dad also identified the stolen wood, and we could trace it back to the same unique wood in our house, and we would sue him for that too, or he could drop the price for stealing our materials. Lastly, because John was a dick, my dad used the leverage of the lien we had on the house to drop the value even more. John was bleeding money and was desperate for anything. So in the end, my parents bought his house for 28% of its market value, and John's wife would end up leaving him a year later. He filed for bankruptcy and lost his land development area since he was upside down on the payments, and he now lives in a cheap studio apartment alone. Update. The reason there was no lawsuits towards the end is because the amount of money he lost on his house was way more money than if we were to file a lawsuit against him. I really should have mentioned this in my post. It seems a few are asking why it took so long to know about the property line. There was an old barbed wire fence that was near where the property line was, and both parties assumed that the fence was the property line. When I found the old survey of the land, there were notes made regarding how many feet south of each post was the true property line. So the true property line was around 20 feet south from what we had thought. So John pretty much deserved everything he got in this story. The part where he was using his daughter's knowledge of the law to commit acts of crime was already terrible, but threatening OP's dog with a pistol had me freaking enraged. Oh yeah, and here's a beautiful picture of that dog that OP posted. What kind of monster would threaten this beautiful dog? Look at that face! This story's titled, Always Clear Your Memory Card Before Pawning an Item. Backstory. Basically, a lady, who we'll call Leech, spent a year helping her best friend, Psycho, harass my family and I over a custody dispute. Leech wasn't related to the family at all, just a friend with an affinity for causing drama. She would make fake profiles along with Psycho and tried to fish information about us out of friends and family. Just some real nasty stuff. Leech would take the online harassment further than Psycho, which never made any sense to me because we had never had any personal problems with Leech. We had known each other back in grade school and were even casual friends, and she used our past history to try to weasel into my friends list, but I already saw that she was helping Psycho slander my name online and didn't buy into her malarkey. She then started copying my profile pictures and making them into ugly memes. Any post I made public was instantly captured and mocked on her stepmother support page. Leech was dating Psycho Husband's best friend. Her boyfriend had a daughter from a previous relationship, and Leech was a proud and attentive stepmother. Most of her identity revolved around being a stepmother. The page on which she posted the meme she made had been running for a number of years and had nearly 10,000 members, and she created it herself. She and Psycho also started a handful of other pages for the sole purpose of harassing and mocking our family. This had been going on since before March, and for Christmas that year, my wife's grandmother got each of the great-grandkids a 3DS. To save some money, she went to a pawn shop for some gently used consoles and games. And this is where karma had dealt us a sweet hand. Nana had purchased 4 Nintendo 3DSs in total. The one my daughter had just happened to have a memory card inside full of photos. Upon a quick scan, I realized that the people looked familiar. It was Leech and her boyfriend. Over and over, dozens of photos, some a little racy. Why else would I be given this opportunity? Of course I was meant to use them, right? I immediately get to work, uploading every photo and file, and set up a fake email account with bits of her information to make it look like hers. I joined any and all dating sites, any I could think of, and even downloaded some apps that aren't advertised as dating, but we all know that's how they're used. In short, I plastered her selfies everywhere. I refrained from using inappropriate ones because I just didn't feel right about that. I answered a couple of messages on each site to make it look more authentic, even sharing more innocent selfies to prove that I was the real deal. A while ago, I had come across Leech's cell number online. She had shared it in a public comment, and I was in the process of screen capping any post she made about my family. I had screen capped that comment too, but I hadn't done anything with it. I was just gathering and retaining all of the information I could, and my patience was about to pay off. After giving a few guys the number, I didn't bother logging on anymore. That was enough damage, I thought. It would be easy enough for her to prove that she had never visited those sites, and they should be able to recognize the photos as being taken with a crappy lens of an early 3DS. But then, the other boot dropped. After a few weeks, maybe a month, I go snooping on Leech's stepmother support page to see if she had anything to say about my antics, but it was quiet. I check out her profile and find that all the past posts have been hidden, and the boyfriend was scrubbed of all the photos available. When I check out his profile, there's a giant rant about unfaithful bitches. Oops. It turns out that Leech had been sleeping with her psycho husband's brother. It had been going on for some time, and no one knew anything, not even Psycho. He then ended the relationship immediately. Being a self-proclaimed stay-at-home mom, Leech had no interest in holding a job. The boyfriend owned everything and paid for everything, including her cell phone. When he found out about the affair, he kicked her out of the house and took her phone. He pawned all of it to pay for some of the enormous debt she had put him in. The reason the 3DS was in the pawn shop at all was because he needed some extra cash. It was his 3DS, and he pawned it for some money for a present for her. He wasn't able to pay it all back in time, and the shop owner resold the item. And that's why his memory card wasn't wiped or anything. And I'd say it was meant to be. The boyfriend should have taken the memory card out of the 3DS, even though he planned on coming back for it. The only person in this world who uses their Nintendo 3DS for taking pictures had it come back and bite them in the ass. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode of r/ProRevenge. If you did, be sure to leave a comment and a thumbs up. If you guys aren't subscribed, please hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on future stories. And I'll see you guys in the next one.